Hello, and welcome to the October 2023 edition of Urgent Care Town Hall, presented by California Urgent Care Association. My name is Claudio Varga, and I'll be your host for today's program. The Urgent Care Town Hall, presented by California Urgent Care Association, is a monthly virtual meeting open to anyone and everyone free of charge, where we share and discuss all things related to urgent care, both in California and nationally. The California Urgent Care Association is a state chapter of the National Urgent Care Association. If you are a member of UCA and located in California, then you're already a member of CALUCA. And we urge and invite you to become more involved with us. There's a lot going on, and we'd really welcome your participation. For more information about CALUCA, please visit our website at www.caluca.org. We welcome your feedback and suggestions for future episodes of Urgent Care Town Hall and invite you to be a presenter yourself. Just email us at info@caluca.org. We have a very special guest today, but before I introduce her, I'd like to remind everyone to save the date for the Urgent Care event of the year. Mark your calendars for the Urgent Care Association's National Urgent Care Convention, April 13th through 17th at Caesars Forum in Las Vegas. I know April 2024 seems a long way off, but it will be here before you know it, and we want to make sure to see everyone at this amazing event. For more details, just go to the UCA website at ucaoa.org. We have a very special guest today, and I'm very excited to introduce her. Tammy Mallow is an extremely experienced and knowledgeable expert in the field of urgent care contracts, reimbursement, payer strategies, and credentialing. She has decades of experience navigating the increasingly complex and challenging world of provider/payer relationships. Hi, Tammy. Welcome to the show. It's a real pleasure to see you again. I know you and I have been crossing paths for years at many events around the country, but I'm really excited to hear your presentation today. Thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise with our viewers today. Please tell us about your passion and fascination with this area of healthcare and about the work you are doing today.
Well, thanks, Claudio, and thank you for having me. While I do that, I'm going to go ahead and take a moment to set up my screen so that we're ready to go when we're ready to go. And you can let me know if there are any problems. But, well, Claudio had a lot of flattering things to say, so I appreciate that. And I always joke about when you're a young person and someone asks you what you're going to do, you don't generally say you're going to grow up and talk about contracting and credentialing. Don't even know what it is at that stage of life, but somehow that's become what I do. And as much as I love that, I really have over the last few years sort of taken that to a different level, and kind of built more layers on top of that. As some of you know, I've worked with you on selecting markets based on the payer climate and the payer landscape, and looking at barriers to network access. And a big part of that comes back to rates. I mean, we're always interested in rates. Of course, patient care and all of that is extremely important. It's the most important thing. But to offer the level of patient care we want to offer and to expand at the level we want to expand, we have to get paid for it. That's the bottom line. So I really thank you for having me. I thank all of you for joining me today. We're going to talk about something that I think is very exciting. If you can get excited about data and rates, which I do, it's exciting to me. For those of you who sat in on my presentations in the past, or you know me, you know that I focused a great deal of my career on studying rates in all the different areas that I just mentioned. But with price transparency, which is what we're going to talk about today, it's really become a full-time job. And like I said, a very exciting one. So I'm just going to get right into it. We have a lot of content today. It's not something that's going to take up all of our time, so we're leaving time for questions. This information, like I said, is exciting and it's new, and there's still a lot to be learned and a lot more to be said down the road. But the story that I wanted to tell you today really starts with a look at how we used to try to gain insight into rates, and then how this recent CMS mandate for price transparency has changed that process. I'm going to take a moment to talk about exactly what price transparency is and how it's different than other things like the No Surprises Act. And then we're going to dig into how we can really use this information. I'm going to share my thoughts on the value and the state of the data as it stands today. And then we're going to talk about next steps. How are we going to use this moving forward? I think we can all agree that we have, for the most part, operated as an industry in secrecy when it comes to sharing rates. A big part of that is because if you look at your contract language pretty carefully, most of it says it's not allowed. You can't talk about rates outside of your organization. Words like collusion are often tossed around. So to find rates, I can only speak for myself, but I used to get pretty creative in how I did that. I would do things like perform EOB reviews. I would ask my friends and my family when I was an administrator for a group of urgent cares in the Midwest, if they went to one of our competitors, can you bring me your EOB? Let me take a look at it and see if I can't, figure out if you're paying X number of dollars for an O3, then I could make some estimations on what I think you're paying for the other rates. I acted like a secret shopper. I would make phone calls, but more than anything else, I actually went in and acted as a patient. So I have this long, weird medical history from all my years of secret shopping and trying to be creative. And then, of course, if you're lucky and you have access to data by working at a company that stores it, then you could actually do some data mining on rates. But even that was extremely laborious. There are a lot of factors like age of contracts, type of services. It was hard to pull it all together and compare apples to apples. And then it could only be shared at a high level because of confidentiality. But those were the best tools we had at the time. And I think we did a pretty good job with them. But now it's even better. And that's what makes this so exciting. We have data now right from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So price transparency truly is a game changer. So last year, CMS published a mandate that requires payers and hospitals to publish contracted and allowed rates. So just think about that for a moment. That's huge for us when it comes to solving this problem of internal transparency and access to our own rates, access to each other's rates, and just the ability to talk about it in general. So when I talk about price transparency, sometimes people tune out and think, oh, I already know about that. It's really it's not important to me. They think that I'm talking about the No Surprises Act. Well, the No Surprises Act, as you can see on the screen here on the left, is more patient-centered. In part, it ensures that patients know what to expect in terms of charges and that they don't get billed for out-of-network visits unexpectedly. So if they go to a clinic and a provider has a big credential yet, that they don't get a bill that they weren't expecting. That's just a small part of it. There are a lot of layers to it. I have some of those outlined here. I'm not going to go through the No Surprises Act for two reasons. Number one, it's not relevant to this conversation other than to clarify that it's not relevant to this conversation. And then number two, the No Surprises Act doesn't apply to urgent care for the most part right now. So let's set that aside. The transparency mandate I'm addressing in the work that I'm doing now is the health plan price transparency mandate by CMS back in July of 2022. It sort of snuck in there too. That's what's so surprising. You think about that, that's over a year ago. And a lot of you are just now hearing about it. A lot of us are just now really digging into it and finding out what it's all about. So they sort of snuck that one in on it, or on us, or at least on me. But under this mandate, you'll hear me say this a few times, payers and hospitals are required to publish contracted and allowed rates, but in very specific detail. And you can see that here on the screen. They have to release it by payer. So each payer has on their website a price transparency page. And I'll show you what one of those looks like in a moment. But so let's use Anthem, for example, in markets that have Anthem, they have to release this information by product. So PPO, HMO, whatever their products are. They list it by individual and group NPI, by group tax ID, by your legal name, your market name, however you're listed on your contract. So if you're listening to me talk now and you are a provider, an owner, operator, your data is out there and it's listed in those manners. And it's listed out by place of service, by type of fee schedule. There are a lot of different elements that this data can be pulled from. And again, the payers are required to release it monthly and the hospitals annually. So as you can see from that last slide, the potential use of this information is pretty compelling. In addition to the identified use cases that I'm going to talk about in a moment, I also want to point out that since the data comes from the payer themselves and it's public, that concern that I mentioned earlier over sharing rates is really mitigated. It's coming from them, not from us. So that opens up a whole new world for those of us who study and use rates. Before I get to the use cases, let's take a look at what this data looks like. I'm going to show you a little more about how it's published and why it's not quite as clean and clear and easy as it sounds. So on the screen here, you'll see this is United Healthcare's transparency and coverage. That's the technical term, the legal term of the mandate. Every payer is required to have this on their website. So once you find it, with United Healthcare, here's their link. I think that should still work. And you see the information pulled up like this by generally by tax ID. So you click on whichever group you want to look at, and the data ends up looking a lot like this, if it even populates. So it's really messy. It's a JSON file that most of us aren't equipped to review. The data is so large that most systems can't handle it. And even when it's pulled into Excel or even a business intelligence tool, most systems just can't handle it. A good example is I've had three clients that I've worked with in the recent, present, and past. One was a health system that wanted to do this themselves, and they ended up giving it up, all three of those, mainly due to the size. It's not only unmanageable and takes a lot of time to sort through, but it's also expensive to store. From what I understand about it, that's one of the limiting factors, prohibiting factors, is the expense and the storage, or the expense to store it. So I think we would mostly agree that we like to look at data that makes sense to us, right? I mean, what's the point if it doesn't make sense? I like to look at the raw data. I'm sure some of you on this webinar would like to look at the raw data too, because we like to see where it comes from. But we really need it in a sortable, easy to view format. So if there are any vendors out there listening to this conversation, that's a good takeaway for you all. Going off script here, but that just came to mind. You can learn a lot by listening to what we need and how we like to look at it. So for example, on the screen here, if I were to write this program, I would want to look at it by payer, in this case, United Healthcare. I want to know what product I'm looking at. For simplicity, I just put PPO. This is all made up by me. All fee schedules, because it could be a case rate, could be fee for service. I want to look at the professional rates, place of service 20, and in this case, a 99213. Then I want to be able to say, what is the contracted rate by my competitor at ABC Urgent Care, CDE Urgent Care, et cetera, on 123 Main Street in Missouri? I want to know what they're contracted for 99213, and then be able to look at that at any code that I have interest in. So I'm going to be offering some tips every now and then on the screen. And my tip for this one is that for you to use a vendor or a data provider that can give you this data in a way that makes sense to you. So what makes sense to me may not make sense to you. You really need to have someone that will work with you on getting this to you in a way that you can use. Because if you're going to outsource it or hire someone new, there's going to be expense involved. And if you're turning that over to someone else, then you want to make sure that you're getting what you need from that investment. So I offer that tip because so far what I've seen is that some vendors are better than others, just like with everything. Some of them are just data providers, and that's understandable. We hire them because they do that. They do data and we do patient care. So I understand that. But also it can be very messy in the way that it's delivered to us. And I think to save time and make it worthwhile, you need them to understand your use case and how you want to look at it. Vendors can also vary by cost. It's all expensive, somewhat expensive. I guess it depends on your price tolerance, and we tend to be pretty frugal in our industry for all the right reasons. But it's that cost to store the data. That's really not something that is negotiable from my understanding. So I would encourage you to shop by price. That's very important, but to also buy the type of service that you're going to get. And as with most services, it's not all equal. But those are my tips when it comes to selecting a vendor. So when I first started working with this data, there are a few things that came to mind on how it could be used. So my primary thought on use cases, outside of just a morbid curiosity about competitors' rates, and we all have to be honest, that's part of it. But when we get back to business, it's things like strategic contract negotiation. How can we use this to negotiate with payers, for example? How could we use it internally or with our RCM teams or vendors to optimize that revenue cycle management process? What kind of influence might it have on mergers and acquisitions? And then finally, could it impact our new market entry decisions? Those last two things are really where I spent a lot of my time in the last couple of years. So those really hit home to me, although I know contract negotiation is critical to all of us. And then if we're going to negotiate new good contracts or even bad ones, we need our RCM vendors and teams to really be on their game. So I'm going to touch on each one of these at a fairly high level. Later on, if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me, email me, call me. I'm really happy to talk to anybody about these things. So starting with the strategic contract negotiation, for those of you in the process of contract negotiation, finally having access to your rates, the rates in your market beyond your own, could really be a game changer. So you're going to hear me say that term a lot today, the game changer, but it's intentional because it fits, and I couldn't think of a better term, so we're stuck with game changer for today. We've always had some best guesses on rates through the strategies, if you want to call them that I mentioned at the top of the meeting, but now we're going to have it right from the payer. So the big questions here are, how is it going to be received? I don't know that yet. What if you get the data, you find that your competitors have much better rates, and you take that to your payer and the payer says, so what? Take it or leave it. I mean, how many times have we heard that anyway? Is this going to make a difference? Is it going to be a positive difference? Is it going to be an indifferent difference, or could it be negative? I mean, those are the things that I think we have to think about and talk about and probably ultimately experience. When it comes to the second use case of optimizing revenue cycle operations, I don't know about you. I mean, some of you have been my clients in the past, but in my experience, it can be a big struggle or even impossible to get your own fee schedules from a payer. Or if you do, it's through an electronic format through the portal that's kind of hunting, pecking, and trying to find your way through it. Or they could send it in a PDF. A lot of times, like with United Healthcare, fee schedules are attached to the contract and these multiple pages of PDFs that really don't make a lot of sense until you study it pretty hard. When they come in Excel, that's what most of us like, but rarely are they all in the same format, is my point. With the price transparency data, once you get the data, you can put it in whatever format you want, and then you could share it with your revenue cycle management team or vendor in a consistent way. I know that most EMR and RCM vendors don't load fee schedules for their clients, usually because of that reason, or if they do, they just do it once and then let it go. But it's that formatting, that messy formatting, that I think they try to avoid. And in my opinion, that leads to errors in posting. You might be posting off of old fee schedules or none at all, so leaving a lot of money on the table and just sort of guessing at what those reimbursements should be. So my hope would be that now that this is available, those companies could consider offering this as a service. So during implementation, and then maybe on some sort of regular schedule, since this comes out on a regular basis, fee schedules in the system so that when we're posting, it's all matching, and we feel we have more confidence in that. Again, payers are required to update that monthly, so that's very helpful. The downside is then that's just another batch of data that's coming in. So that's a whole other issue. Anyway, another potential use case is, from my perspective, is with mergers and acquisitions. And of course, that's something that we're talking about in our industry a lot over the last few years. Right now, we're at the mercy of the reports that we receive, and those are often based on old fee schedules, old contracts. You know, by the time a group is ready to be acquired or to merge, I'm sure their contracts are old, and have they kept up with their fee schedules? Some of the things I just talked about. But with price transparency data, you as the potential acquirer would be able to see those rates. We could apply some formulas around what we know to be true about E&M distribution and additional ancillary revenue. And then we could make some really good, I didn't want to use the word guesses, but estimations on what we would expect the net revenue per visit by payer to be. And then this would allow us to see how the reported performance aligns with the potential net revenue per visit by payer based on those rates. So again, it's more scientific than what we've had in the past. And then new market entry is really where I spend most of my time with this data. Being able to add specific rates to your market assessment is another game changer when it comes to making a decision from a payer perspective. So when I look at new market entry, I'm looking at it from a payer perspective. So one layer that would be added on to the other important elements of studying a new market. So what I normally look at in a market review from a payer viewpoint is credentialing. What are the credentialing requirements? If I'm a nurse practitioner model and one of my major payers requires me to have a physician on site at all times, clearly that's something I need to know about before I go into a new market. What are the covered lives? How many people are insured in that area? But not just the number, but if, for example, United Healthcare is closed in a market, I look at the number of covered lives. And if United Healthcare makes up, 40, 50, 60% of the covered lives in that market and it's closed, then that's something important for me to know before I move into that market. So any barriers to network access. And then now we're able to add with more confidence what the rates are in that market. So it just gives us, again, another layer of confidence when we're deciding to or not to, that's equally important, to enter or not enter a new market. Now we're able to really make our decisions based on data. As I said, those were the ideas that I came up with early on, and I still feel very confident each one of them. But what I'd like to do now is talk about my thoughts on the state of the union, if you will, after I've worked with this data with both large and small clients over the last 6 to 9 months. What is the reality versus the expectations? Well, first of all, when you have so much information, it can be very messy. And then considering that it comes from insurance companies, it can be very messy. So my first concern is that it's messy data. So for example, global rates are sometimes reported very cleanly. If you draw your attention here to the screen, in this first example, I mean, this is lovely. So we have no E&M codes. We have an S code of 182. And I just did some comparisons. Obviously, I changed tax ID numbers and made up clinic names, but these are actually real rates. So you can sort of see how some of them really differ, which I think is interesting and what we expected. But my point here is it can be reported very cleanly, or it can be like the second one where it's more messy. And for example, this is one tax ID. It is one clinic, different locations. The report came out with a $270 rate for every E&M code, which I would then assume that is a case rate, even though it's not listed under the S code. The second location actually has E&M code rates that appear to be some percentage of Medicare for that locality and a case rate. And then the third one is similar to the first one, or exactly like the first one. So what I'm thinking, and I have some hypotheses that I'm trying to vet through, but I'm going to guess that when a payer releases data with a rate by each E&M code and an S code, that this is the fee schedule that they would normally use, and then they've negotiated a case rate. And if that's the case, and I'm going to find this out by the time I do the Urgent Care Association in the spring, I'm doing a lecture there on this, is if these are their case rates, this is their fee schedule, and this is the case rate they've negotiated with you, which is as we can all see is a really nice one, then you could use that information to determine whether or not your case rate is in line or not with your using that E&M distribution formula that I talked about earlier. If they're going to publish those rates, it's right there for you. I don't know if that's the case, but I am working on that. Haven't quite cracked that code yet. So we're seeing E&M codes and S codes. I'm seeing different types of fee schedules, derived, negotiated, fee schedule, and then a percentage, still trying to crack that code as well. So my next tip here is to make sure your data provider understands these nuances in urgent care. I've had vendors tell me that it's much easier to do this for hospitals than it has been for urgent care, because we have just so many nuances. But I would share with my vendor any nuances to my practice. For example, if I had carve-outs, maybe I have a case rate, but I also have carve-outs, they're going to see some strange numbers outside of my global rate and maybe not understand what those are, but we could share that. Maybe there's a tiered case rate. So you see multiple case rates. That could be because it's tiered based on the level, or there's some sort of escalator built in and it kicked in during the month the data was published, but it was different last month. So there are a lot of different things that can happen with this data that as we learn more about it, it may make more sense. My second concern is inconsistency, which really is sort of in line with it being messy. I found that some of the payers publish the data based on the legal name. So when I do contracting and credentialing, I like for the legal name that matches the tax ID be the name that's on the contract. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes the marketed name gets on, sometimes even just a provider's name gets on the contract, and that's going to make this data be a little inconsistent. So knowing that, also I was hoping that I would be able to just choose a place of service and feel really good about how that was cleanly reported. But what I found is that the place of service between 20 and 11 really hasn't made much of a difference. I have some theories around that too, but just so you know that if you look at this data, that's one piece that's a little inconsistent. And again, the E&M codes and S codes. So what I have come to determine the last couple of weeks is that I think it's really important to look at your own data first, so before you look at a competitor's data, so you can match up what makes sense about what you know about your practice and your rates and how it's reported, and then apply those same principles with some degree of caution to your competitors in the same market, so that you get a clearer understanding. Missing data is also an issue. It may be one that has an explanation, but without any legend, there's no legend or any kind of directory that tells you how to read this that I found. It's just kind of a guessing game. So when I think about this, I think that data might be missing for legitimate reasons, like it's just not updated. So if a group is new to the market, their data isn't loaded yet, so it's not going to show up yet. Maybe they're just not in network, and that's often something we want to know. It could be that they're not in network, again, because they're new, or they've elected to be non-par, or maybe the network is closed, but we can't tell that from the way this is reported. And then the other reason you might not find data you're looking for is because you haven't used the right name. With mergers and acquisitions, that's made the naming piece a little complicated. But then also, how do we know that it's not just an error at the payer level? I mean, those are things that we're still trying to sort through. So a tip I have here, a few of them actually, is if there's data missing for a particular operator, what I've been doing is if I pull up Clinic A and there's no information, and I know Clinic A is down the street and I've seen them, then I go to the Find a Doctor page on that payer. So in this case, we're looking at Fidelis. Look at the Fidelis Find a Doctor page, see if that operator is listed as a network, and if they are, then you might find you need to dig deeper to find the data. Now, granted, the directory cannot be updated and they're no longer a network, but still it gets us one step closer. You may also need to run the data later. So if the information's not there now because it's a fairly new contract or a new group to the network, it may just not be published yet. So later on down in the year or even the next month, it should be updated. And then when it comes to the naming, there are free websites out there where you can look up NPIs and tax IDs and legal names, and then you can try to match all that together and put those names and tax IDs in and see if that can't get you closer to the missing data that you're looking for. So those were a few of the glaring issues that I've seen so far, but there was one other that I thought of after I finished putting this together, and that is that if you remember at the beginning, I mentioned that the data is published by group and individual NPIs. So if you pull all that data, you're going to get every individual provider, Tammy Mallow, MD, John Doe, NP, all in that data. So it can get very confusing, because if a provider is or has worked at another number of differently owned clinics, it's all going to pop up in there under their NPI. And so then you're not sure exactly where that's linked to by the way that the data is reported. So I like to look at it at a group or clinic tax ID and NPI level to sort of filter that out first and avoid some of that confusion. But it's important that it's out there by individual provider, because in some markets, I remember years ago, I don't know if it's still true, but in Alabama, Blue Cross Blue Shield only contracted with individuals. So if I would pull up Clinic ABC, there would be no data there because it's all at the individual level. And I know sometimes when working in contracting and credentialing, if I couldn't get a group in at a group level, then I would apply at individual level. So we need to keep that in mind. But overall, the data is amazing. Once you're knowledgeable about how to analyze it, unfortunately, it doesn't come out looking quite like the shot I have here on the screen. I take all the raw data that I get, and then I format it in a way that makes sense to my client, depending on their use case, or for myself if I'm studying something. I just think that the more we use it and we collaborate on it, the better it becomes. It's definitely a group effort. You know, we really can't hide this information anymore. So I think we need to think about how we can use it together. I personally have not used it yet for negotiations. I'm really anxious to hear from any of you that have used it or have tried to use it. I mentioned earlier, I'm speaking at UCA in the spring, and so I would love to take some real life use cases and share it at that time. Anonymously is fine, but just to say, here's what we've experienced so far with the payers. I think that's something we're all interested in knowing about. So please share if you've had that experience. Call me, email me, whatever it takes to reach out. Like I said, I mostly used it to study new markets, and then to help groups access their own and their competitors' rates in their markets. As with anything new, this is an evolutionary process. The early adopters have been very helpful in helping me sort through it and learn about it. Every week I feel better about the information, and I personally have a deeper understanding after just being in it on a daily basis. But I need to keep studying it. Getting more of you involved in it makes it only more valuable. Knowing that I'm talking to primarily a group of California providers, I don't have to tell you how messy your provider list is. I know 25 or 30 contracts is not unusual or more, and that's just the taking out any of the work comp or additional IPAs, that kind of thing. So yours is a huge undertaking, and I've not done a California one yet myself. But my next big step is to meet with some of the payers themselves and try to get a better understanding of how this information is pulled on their end, how it's reported. You know, what are their struggles? What are their thoughts? How are they positioning themselves for those of us, not just us, but hospitals and orthopedists and everybody else, dentists, anybody with an NPI? How are they preparing themselves for this conversation that they're going to have with us? So that's really one of my next big steps, and hoping that I can report some of that next spring as well. And then I want to perfect how we report it out to you, to the consumers, and happy to help you with that. And then I think once we have more confidence in the results and more experience under our belts, then we have more use cases. Some of those that I thought about this week while I was working on this presentation is those online cost estimators that we have. Those could become cost predictors. We could really hang our hat on that, so to speak. And we will also be more confident when we go to the payers for negotiation. maybe we could, as an industry, publish this data at an industry level to advocate for better rates for us as a whole. Maybe even use it for some lobbying efforts at a congressional level. So a lot of ideas that, that are out there, and I welcome any that you all may have. So when information comes directly from the payer, like it does now, it really adds a whole new element of, I don't know if the right word is validity, or just confirms some of our, I guess, heightens our expectations and more accountability. I think that's the word I'm searching for, from the payers to give us this information and make it make sense. So I know that was a lot in a short amount of time. I get excited about it and maybe went through it pretty quickly, but we'll make sure you have copies of these. And that's pretty much it for today's presentation. Feel free to send in questions, suggestions, experiences. I'll address those today if we have time. And then, of course, in the next few days. My final thought really to share with you is that competitors can see your rates. So to answer the question that's on the front of the presentation of, can competitors really see my rates? That answer is yes, with the right tools. So I think it's important not to be left behind. Urgent care operators that I've worked with have never been those to be left behind. We're entrepreneurs, we're inventors, we're excited about our business and how we can make it better. And I think this is just one more tool for us to use.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you. That was really, really interesting. That was a lot. I think I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, that's talking about it is the easy part. I think, doing things with it is the part that is really going to be the challenge. So we did have a couple of questions. So looks like we have plenty of time. If you don't mind sticking around for a few minutes and answering some of these. So we did have one early on. It looks like somebody didn't quite, they missed the very, very top, the very beginning. And so the question was, where do we get this raw data? If you wouldn't mind just going back and recapping that.
Sure, that's great. I've learned that recapping is a good idea because I find myself, go through it quickly, and I think everybody's on board when it's new to so many people. So I don't mind recapping at all. To access the data, every insurance company is required to have it on their website. So you find their price transparency webpage, and they have to release it in what's called machine readable files. So I was hoping it'd be a nice, pretty Excel spreadsheet, but the data is so large that it has to be released in a JSON machine readable only file. So you go to the website and then you go through a series of maneuvers to get the data out. The problem that we're having is that the data is so large that it can't be read by the average system. So an Excel spreadsheet, for example, it has to be through a very powerful Power BI type tool. And so a lot of us have found that we've tried to do it ourselves, myself included, and I rely on vendors now to do it for me.
Got it. Okay, so we're gonna have to need a little bit of help. Of help to do this.
It'll be a lot smarter than
we can't always do everything. Sometimes we got to admit that it's going to be worth it to get somebody that's going to help us, because we're going to get some value out of this. We're going to have to just kind of work our way through it. So super. Okay. And then again, so what are the advantages of getting my own data in a nutshell?
Yeah, I think the advantages are a few things. Number one, how many times have we found that the fee schedule that we thought should be loaded isn't, and so we're getting paid, our claims are getting paid incorrectly. So now we can at least see what the payer has in the system, and we can compare that to what we expect. And maybe we'll be pleasantly surprised. Maybe our fee schedule's changed to the good and we didn't know it, and we've been billing out lower than we should. The old pay less than bill charges. So I may have 150 rate, but if I only bill 140, the payer's only going to pay me 140. So knowing your own fee schedule is important. I think that being able to study your own data before you start looking at a competitor's is important. As I mentioned in the presentation, there's just so many little puzzle pieces to put together. And when you can put together your own puzzle because you know what it looks like on the end, then you have a better chance at putting together the puzzle of your competitors in the same market. So and then of course for your revenue cycle management team to have access to that data, I think is really critical at this stage.
Awesome. And what do we do if some of it's wrong? Or
I think, and I mentioned earlier, I'm going to start reaching out to the payers because I have found some things that I could say, okay, well, if it's this, then it's probably that. But there's error in all data. There's error in everything any of us ever do. So I think if you know you have a case rate of 135 and in the system it says 125 or it says 175, you have to reach out to your payer rep. That's a lecture that takes another hour of how to get to your payer rep.
that's a whole other presentation.
Exactly. But you have to report it and find out. I would line it up with some EOBs to see how I'm getting paid. But if you find an error, then you definitely need to reach out to your payer rep.
I, jokingly, sort of half jokingly, I see this topic as being a mini series. One is, this is the data, this is how you look at it, this is what you do when it's wrong, this is how you talk to people about it and how you fix it, going forward. It's not, you can't swallow all of this in just in one bite, really.
Yeah.
Is there any way to keep my company's information out of this? I mean, what if I don't want the whole world looking at this stuff?
No, there's not, unfortunately, that I'm aware of. I had someone recently tell me, oh, my data's not there, I didn't participate in this. Unfortunately, it wasn't. That's not how it works. If they're mandated to report it. Now, some payers, there's been some question about whether or not they're compliant, and since the payers have to release it on a monthly basis, I wonder if I'm a payer and I'm releasing data today. How old is that data? Is it today's data? So anybody new that's come into the network this month that I can count that's there, or am I just releasing new data that it's new because it's released today, but it's still really old? I don't, who knows? Like I said, it's new, and I don't think the payers are really excited about it. Obviously, it's one more thing that they have to do and be held accountable for.
Got it. So bottom line, I was just sorry. So I was going to say, bottom line, if you have a contract, if you're participating with these people, your information, it's fair game.
Right. I guess the only way not to have it published is to not participate.
Good luck.
Yeah. And thinking about what you just said about a series, I think what would be great once we're a little better at it is to actually do a demo that shows this is how the data looks when it comes in. And if you want to use it for this, then sort it this way. If you want to use it for that, then sort it this way. That would be lovely. I don't think any of us are there yet. There are several vendors out there. And like I said earlier, some of them are just data providers, and they give you the data and then you figure out, what you're looking at and how to do it. Others are getting more involved with involving specialists in particular areas, whether it be dental or urgent care or whatever, to better understand it. So it's the tip of the iceberg.
Got it. Okay. So, this reminds me of that joke about the stock market. It's either going to go up or it's going to go down or it's going to stay the same, right? There's three options. So taking out your crystal ball, what's going on with payer rates? I mean, are we going to see any improvement? I mean, what do you see? You live with all of this data and you see everybody's data and information and stuff. Just give us the highlight reel. What can we expect to see, or do you see any trends?
I don't know. I think I wonder about level setting rates. And I wonder if we have groups whose rates are up here and groups whose rates are down here, that to get rid of all the noise that this is creating, the payers say, okay, we're going to do this. Like big companies do with salaries. They come in and they say, okay, everybody's all over the place. For each position, we're going to define, an entry, medium, high, and ceiling. And you may occasionally get some rates increases based on good behavior or whatever. But I wonder if that's what's going to happen, which is good news for some people and is really bad news for others. I don't know. So that's only speculation. That's one of the reasons that my next big step is to spend some time with the payers and see what they're thinking.
Got it. Wonderful. So I know we're going to see you in Las Vegas in April. You
Yes.
alluded to it. So I want to mention to everybody, look for Tammy, come to UCA, Las Vegas in April. It's always a great educational program, super networking, get to meet Tammy in person, get to sit in. Probably you'll do more than one presentation. You typically do. So I look forward to seeing you there. And how can people get in touch with you directly if they have some follow-up questions? Everybody's free. Anyone can email info@caluca.org and we'll forward information to Tammy. So that's an easy one, info@caluca.org. But Tammy, you want to tell people how to get in touch with you directly?
Sure. I have a pretty easy email address. It's been the same for about 20 years. It's mallow.consulting@gmail.com. I've thought about changing it, but I get people pop up out of 10 years ago, so I'm just leaving it there. And then yeah, through CALUCA is probably the best way, or through the Urgent Care Association. They always know how to find me.
Sure, sure. We send out a lot of emails, and anyone anytime can just hit reply, and it'll come back to info@CALUCA, and you can ask us any question or how to get in touch with any of our presenters, including Tammy. Tammy, thank you. It's great seeing you again. Look forward to seeing you. If I don't cross paths with you again, I'll see you in Las Vegas in the spring. And thanks very much for spending the time with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right, you take care. We'll see you next time.